What if time wasn't what we thought it was? What if the story of humanity, carefully shaped in books and schools, was just a fragment of something much bigger and much older? The Sumerian civilization, considered the cradle of humanity, left a record that defies all modern logic: the list of Sumerian kings, a document engraved on clay tablets that states rulers reigned for more than 241,000 years. Yes, 241,000 years, a number so impossible that science itself preferred to call it a myth. But what would happen if it weren't a myth? Imagine for a moment what that would mean. Kings who lived before the flood, before any known empire, and who ruled with almost divine wisdom and power. They were not portrayed as ordinary men, but as beings from heaven, the Anunnaki, gods, teachers, or perhaps visitors from another world. The tablets not only tell their stories, but describe a timeline that modern archaeology refuses to accept. And here the real question begins. What did the Sumerians know about time, life, and creation that we have forgotten or been prevented from remembering? While archaeologists tried to fit history into logical chronologies, the Sumerians themselves left coded messages about cosmic cycles, about eras that lasted thousands of years, and about kings who did not die like men. Every symbol, every number, seems to scream a hidden truth. Time is not linear, it's cyclical, and perhaps manipulable. Think about it. If the first human records already spoke of impossible reigns, could it be that the Sumerians were at fault, or ours? Do we, limited by our modern perception, interpret as fantasy what they witnessed as reality? Perhaps what we call ancient history is just the echo of a lost era, a time when gods and men walked side by side, and humanity still remembered its cosmic origin. Archaeology may try to bury this mystery under labels like myth or symbolic literature, but there is something they cannot erase: consistency. Different tablets, found in different places and at different times, tell the same story. The same names, the same dynasties, the same impossible periods. This is no coincidence. It's a meticulous record, and it appears to have been left to anyone who was ready to question it. But why would these records exist if they were just inventions? And more importantly, who would be interested in hiding their true interpretation? When we look at history with eyes free of prejudice, we realize that the line that separates myth from reality is much thinner than we imagine. Perhaps these divine kings were not symbols of spiritual power, but real beings, endowed with knowledge and technology far beyond our current understanding. What if their long lives were not metaphors, but reflections of a lost biology or science, the same one that thousands of years later we still seek in genetic formulas and the race for immortality? Everything seems to point in the same direction. The Sumerians didn't just tell the past, they left a warning for the future. The mystery of his 241,000-year reign is not just about time, it is about origin, purpose, and truth. A truth that does not fit into linear chronologies or school books. A truth that challenges empires and beliefs. And that's why this video exists, because there are questions no one else is asking and answers that are waiting to be discovered. Do you believe that kings could reign for millennia? That time could be controlled, that the history of humanity was rewritten to hide something much bigger? Think about it, because what comes next will make you question everything you've learned about the past. Before we continue to decipher this ancient riddle, I want you to pause and reflect on what you just heard. It's not just a distant story about kings and gods. It's about understanding the content behind the words. Because each symbol, each line written by the Sumerians, carries a purpose: to awaken something in whoever reads it. And that's exactly what we're doing here, relearning to see the past with eyes that seek the truth, not just what we've been taught. Therefore, I want to ask you something simple but very important. Leave a like. It seems like a small gesture, but it's what keeps this quest alive. Every like, every interaction, makes more people receive this content and start asking questions too. And that's what bothers you. When people start thinking for themselves and more, subscribe to the channel right now. This way you don't miss the next parts of this investigation, because what we are going to reveal goes far beyond the king list. Let's talk about the code hidden in the tablets, about the link between the 241,000-year reign and human DNA, and what this could mean for the future of our species. I also want you to comment something important below. Write, "I want to understand what the Sumerians knew." This phrase is more than a comment. It is a commitment to the truth. It's the kind of message that creates a connection between people who, like you, are beginning to see that the past is not what it seems. So do this now. Leave a like, comment on the sentence, and subscribe to the channel, because knowledge only turns into power when it is shared, and the next revelation will show you that time, as we know it, has never been the same since the gods ruled the earth. The Sumerian tablets that cite the 241,000-year reigns are not just fragments of stone. They are pieces of a memory that time has tried to erase. Each of them was written with millimeter precision, not by artists, but by scribes who knew they were recording something greater than simple stories. And this is where the real mystery begins. How could such an ancient civilization, the first on record, have such a profound understanding of time, royalty, and divinity? What did the Sumerians really want to be remembered? When we look at what they left behind, we see a pattern. They were not describing ordinary men. The first kings were not born from the human womb. They came down from heaven. They were the rulers before the flood, beings whose wisdom and longevity surpassed any human limit. They were the founders of civilization, the bearers of knowledge. And it is interesting to note that even in completely different cultures, Egyptian, Mayan, Hindu, and even in biblical traditions, the narrative is always the same. Celestial beings came, taught, and ruled. The Sumerian king list is not an isolated text. It fits into a set of traditions that seem to come from the same source. It is as if the entire planet had received different versions of the same story, each culture molding it to its own language, but maintaining the identical core. The beginning of humanity is linked to beings that were not of this world. And perhaps what we call mythology is just the ancient way of telling a real story, one that humanity is not yet ready to fully accept. But there is something even more disconcerting: time. The Sumerians claimed that some of these kings ruled for 28,800 years, others for 36,000, until the total reached 241,200 years before the Great Flood. If this were symbolic, why use such specific numbers? And why insist that, after the flood, rains drastically decreased, as if something had changed in the very essence of humanity? Maybe because it really has changed. Perhaps the flood was not just a natural catastrophe, but a programmed reset, the restart of a humanity beginning to awaken beyond the control of the gods. The Sumerians said that before the flood, kings were literally the bearers of the divine name. This means that their power came not just from the throne, but from a direct connection with the gods themselves. They were hybrids, part human, part celestial. When the flood came and erased everything, this lineage was almost lost. And it is in this almost that the secret lies, because some families, according to the texts, survived and continued to transmit fragments of this divine blood. And this echo still resonates today, disguised in symbols, names, and traditions that have spanned the centuries. Think of the word kingdom. To this day, we use the same hierarchical structure: kings, queens, crowns, thrones. But the concept was born there, with the Sumerians. They created the idea that power descends from heaven to earth and never the other way around. This shaped all of human history. Religion, politics, science. They all carry this idea of vertical, divine, celestial authority. This is no coincidence. It's inheritance, and this inheritance began when the Anunnaki chose their human representatives. Imagine the scene, a newly created civilization, looking up at the sky and seeing their gods walk among them. They taught how to plant, build, write, and when they left kings to rule. Kings who had their blessings, but also their mission, to maintain order, guard knowledge, and ensure that the balance between the divine and the human was not broken. But power has a price. As time passed, these kings began to see themselves not as intermediaries, but as gods. And that's when the cycle of corruption began. When man found himself on the throne of the gods, he forgot his origin. He forgot that he was created to learn, not to dominate. And little by little, memories of the Golden Age became myths, legends, parables. The truth was rewritten, diluted in metaphors. Schools began to teach that the gods were inventions and that everything was just imagination. But what if it wasn't? What if humanity, by denying its own origins, had moved away from what made it special? Modern archaeology, even though he is reluctant, he cannot ignore the details. The Sumerians' mathematical precision, their understanding of astronomy, their measurements of time based on planetary cycles, all of this is inexplicable for a culture that supposedly emerged out of nowhere. How could people 5,000 years ago know the exact size of the planets, the movement of the stars, and the Earth's precession cycle, something that science only rediscovered millennia later? The Sumerians said they received this knowledge from the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. What if this is literal? What if they actually came from somewhere else, bringing with them superior technology, biology, and consciousness? This would explain not only the long reigns, but also the sudden advancement of humanity. The leap from primitive life to an organized civilization with writing, laws, and science was not natural. It was induced. And the most intriguing thing is that when we look at the pattern of ancient civilizations, they all seem to repeat the same script. They appear suddenly, reach an inexplicable peak, and then mysteriously disappear. Egypt, Mayan, Inca, Atlantis, they all talk about beings who came from the sky and taught everything. It is as if, from time to time, history is reset to ensure that man never exceeds the imposed limit. Maybe that's why the Sumerian king list is so disturbing. Because it doesn't just talk about long reigns. It talks about eras of absolute power, of a time when humanity still remembered where it came from. And accepting this would mean admitting that we are not alone, that we never have been. Now tell me, do you really believe that a civilization without telescopes, without computers, and without machines could accurately measure the movement of stars, predict eclipses, and map entire constellations? Or did they have help from those who raised them? Leave a like if you feel there is something wrong with the story they told you, and comment below on the phrase, "I want to know what the ancient kings hid." Because what comes next will show you that the secret of 241,000 years of reign isn't just about the past. It's about what's still happening now, right before our eyes. When talking about kings who reigned for hundreds of centuries, the first reaction is disbelief. After all, everything we've learned about biology, time, and human evolution says this is impossible. But perhaps the question should not be how, but rather, why? Why would a civilization as ancient as Sumer record such precise, absurd numbers if there wasn't a reason behind it? No scribe would spend months engraving clay tablets with detailed information about imaginary rulers. They believed what they were recording, and perhaps they knew much more than we did. The Sumerian king list not only challenges our chronology, it destroys the very idea of linear time. According to the tablets, these kings did not age like humans. They ruled as the sun rose and set countless times, which, to modern scholars, seems like a metaphor. But to those reading with open eyes, sounds like a clue. If these kings had a divine origin, if they carried Anunnaki blood, perhaps their lifespan would not be tied to the same clock that governs the common man. Perhaps the secret of time, of longevity, was one of the greatest gifts, or weapons, left by them. The most fascinating thing is that after the flood, the time of kings decreases drastically. From thousands of years, they become hundreds, and later, dozens. This is no coincidence. It's as if something has been taken from humanity, an ability we once had that has been deliberately suppressed. The ancient texts call this the loss of the fire of the gods. The kings before the flood were hybrid beings, direct heirs of divine blood. The kings of later, simple humans trying to maintain what was left of their lost glory. It is at this moment that the spiritual and genetic domain of the gods begins to disappear, and man, for the first time, truly sees himself as mortal. The Sumerians believed that time was controlled by the gods. Not a time like ours, but a divine time, measured by cosmic cycles and planetary alignments. The Anunnaki themselves were masters of this knowledge. They understood that time was not just a sequence of days, but an energy, a force that could be manipulated. It's possible that by extending their reigns over tens of thousands of years, they were simply living in a reality where time flowed differently. What if this same manipulation is still happening today in hidden ways, at levels that we cannot perceive? Modern science is already beginning to admit that time can be relative, that it can distort under certain conditions. But the Sumerians knew this for millennia. His records are not the result of superstition, but of direct observation. They didn't just count time, they measured it with Bay themselves in the stars, and left precise instructions about astronomical cycles that coincide with historical events and global cataclysms. When the texts say that a king reigned for 36,000 years, perhaps they are talking about a complete cycle of planetary alignment. Or perhaps a lost technology that allowed biological aging to be controlled. Think about the audacity of recording all this in stone. It's as if the Sumerians knew that at some point in the future, someone would try to understand, someone, perhaps like you, who feels there is something wrong with the official narrative, who realizes that ancient civilizations could not have been so advanced just by chance, that the origin of humanity cannot be explained solely by biological evolution, that there is a missing link, a point of connection between the human and the divine that has been carefully erased. And there's more. The tablets talk about something that many ignore, the books of destiny. They say that kings received the right to govern from them. These books were not made of paper or clay, but of a luminous material described as tablets that emitted brightness and sound. Does this sound familiar? Technological artifacts in a time where, supposedly, none of these existed. These objects were the symbols of divine power, the machines of the gods. Whoever owned them governed. Whoever lost them fell. This would explain why so many later civilizations fought to acquire what they called sacred artifacts. Now think, what if part of these objects still exists? What if the power of ancient civilizations is still hidden somewhere in the modern world, perhaps in the hands of the few who understand the true legacy of the gods? Today's elites, secret groups, families that control governments and the economy, do they keep, in their symbols and rituals, fragments of this Sumerian knowledge? Everything indicates yes. The same patterns that existed millennia ago are still visible today. The cult of gold, immortality, total control of time and life. The Sumerians believed that gold was the blood of the gods, essential to sustaining their longevity and power. And isn't it curious that, even today, gold is the ultimate symbol of value and stability? It seems that humanity inherited not only the knowledge of the Anunnaki, but also their obsession. These ancient kings were not just leaders. They were engineers of reality, capable of transforming the physical world through speech and vibration. This idea appears in different cultures and always in a similar way. The verb creates. The voice of the gods shapes matter. It's as if the universe responded to consciousness and they knew it. The power of creation was at the right vibration, at the right frequency. And this wisdom, passed from generation to generation, ended up fragmenting into doctrines, religions, and occult sciences. Modern man laughs at these stories, but lives under their consequences. We still follow calendars based on cosmic cycles, we still perform rituals around equinoxes, we still look to the sky for answers. The difference is that, unlike the ancients, we forget what we are looking for. The Sumerian kings knew. They looked to the stars, not just to worship them, but to remember home. And perhaps this is the central point of it all. The 241,000 years of reign are not about politics or government. They are about mastery of time and existence. A civilization that has mastered time could, theoretically, exist eternally, and perhaps still does, just beyond our perceptual reach. Now I want you to think and tell me in the comments, is time really a straight line, or is it a cycle? A controlled, restarted, manipulated cycle? Leave a like if you believe that humanity lost control of time millennia ago, and write the phrase, "The time of the gods still rules the world," if you feel that somehow we are still living under the shadows of those kings who came from heaven. When the Sumerians wrote about kings who ruled for hundreds of centuries, they weren't just talking about time, they were describing a state of being. The power of these kings was not just political, it was spiritual, almost cosmic. They were the intermediaries between heaven and earth, the only ones capable of understanding the language of the gods, of translating what was beyond the human. Longevity in this context was not just biological, but a consequence of a perfect harmony between body, mind, and spirit, something that the Anunnaki had mastered and transmitted only to those they considered worthy. But what happened next? What caused this harmony to be lost? According to ancient records, there was a time when the gods began to diverge from each other. The balance that supported the world was broken, and the kings, until then beings of wisdom, became pawns in a much greater dispute. The Anunnaki themselves were divided into two groups: those who wished to continue ruling humanity, and those who believed that that man should walk on his own. And it was from this division that celestial wars, stories of fall, floods, and rebirths were born. The texts describe the moment when knowledge, previously reserved for a few, began to be spread among humans. It was an act of rebellion, but also of liberation. The gods who believed in man's autonomy taught him science, medicine, astronomy, and the secret of vital energy. This transmission became known as the delivery of light. It is the same moment that, in other cultures, was portrayed as the fall of Lucifer, the bringer of light, the one who brought forbidden knowledge. The same story, told differently. Humanity, upon receiving the fire of knowledge, freed itself, but also condemned itself. The Sumerian kings were direct descendants of these rebellious masters. Therefore, they were seen with ambiguity, half gods, half men, half blessing, half curse. And perhaps that's why his reigns lasted so long. They carried within themselves the genetic code of immortality, but also the weight of an ancestral guilt, the guilt of defying their own creator. The Anunnaki, who remained in power, then decided to limit man's access to original knowledge. This limitation became what we now call human time. The time of men was born from the break with the time of the gods. It is as if humanity has been disconnected from a cosmic network that controls the flow of life. Before, man lived in tune with the universe. Every breath, every beat was part of a larger dance. Afterwards, he began to live separately, counting the days, measuring the years, believing that growing old and dying was natural. But it wasn't. It was the result of a forced disconnection, a block imposed by the creators themselves. Ancient kings tried to resist this. Many were persecuted, erased from history, their names rewritten, their tombs hidden. Others simply disappeared. And there are records that say that some ascended again to the heavens, promising to return when the cycle of humanity was complete. This promise echoes to this day in different religions. The return of the gods, the day of judgment, the new dawn. Everyone talks about the same thing, the moment when man will reconnect with his divine essence. The Sumerians believed that the flood was the breaking point, the great reset. The world was washed, not just by water, but by amnesia. Everything that existed before, technology, wisdom, cosmic language, was lost. And what remained was the fragmented memory, transformed into myths. This is why, around the world, completely isolated cultures speak of a golden age before the cataclysm where gods walked among men. It's the same pattern, repeated with ancient precision. Coincidence, or evidence of a common origin? Most disturbingly, even after the flood, the Sumerians continued to venerate these kings. They believed that the power of the gods was still present in their descendants. This idea spread to other civilizations. The Egyptian pharaohs said they were children of the sun, the Chinese emperors, sons of heaven, European kings anointed by divine right. All claimed the same ancestral lineage. The throne of earth still belonged to those who inherited the blood of the gods. But what if this is more than metaphor? What if this lineage actually survived, hidden, passing down secrets from generation to generation? Think about the families that have always been in power, from ancient empires to the present day. They not only control resources but also knowledge. They are guardians of something that does not belong to the common man, something that perhaps came from the stars. And there is one more curious detail. The Sumerians described the Anunnaki as beings who shined like the sun, endowed with luminous skin, eyes of fire, and voices that made the earth tremble. These accounts are repeated in several cultures. The luminous gods of the Mayans, the resplendent beings of the Egyptians, the fallen angels of Hebrew traditions, all sharing the same description. What if these beings were not spiritual but physical, advanced biological entities capable of manipulating energy and matter? Perhaps the glow was real, the result of technology that made them literally radiant. What is undeniable is that the Sumerians did not invent these stories. They inherited them, and they turned them into writing so that time would not destroy them. The king list is just the tip of an iceberg of secrets that span millennia. She speaks of a time when man knew the power of frequencies, vibrations, and creation through sound. Kings commanded not by force, but by word, the same word that, according to the ancients, gave rise to the universe. The creative verb, the divine voice, manifested on earth. Maybe this is the missing key. Perhaps the secret of 241,000 years is not in biology or mathematics, but in vibration. The longevity of the gods may have been the result of perfect vibrational harmony, something that kept them in tune with the cosmos. When man lost this frequency, he also lost eternity. And since then, he has desperately tried to find it again. In religions, in science, in machines, in prayers. Now stop and reflect. Does time really exist, or is it just an illusion created when we disconnect from the original frequency? The Sumerians seemed to know that the secret to immortality was not in living forever, but in being in constant resonance with the divine. What if humanity, without realizing it, is still trying to return to this lost vibration, rebuilding little by little the same path that the ancients took millennia ago? Leave a like if this idea makes sense to you. And in the comments, write the phrase, "I want to remember the vibration of the gods," to show that you are one of the people who is awakening to this forgotten knowledge. And sign up, because in the next part, we'll delve even deeper into this mystery and discover what the Sumerian kings did to manipulate time and defy death. The ancient Sumerians believed that time was not a straight line, but a spiral, an endless cycle that repeated itself in perfect patterns. For them, the past, present, and future coexisted, and the divine kings were those who knew how to navigate between these dimensions, understanding the flow of universal energy. This is why their reigns lasted so long. They weren't tied to time like we are. They transcended time, and this ability, according to the texts, was granted only to those who possessed the seal of the gods, knowledge that went beyond human understanding. These kings mastered what they called the science of balance. Everything in Sumerian civilization revolved around this principle: harmony between the body and the cosmos, between man and the gods, between heaven and earth. Each temple was built as a representation of this harmony. Each stone had a purpose. Each measurement corresponded to a celestial alignment. They didn't just build monuments, they built portals. Their power was not just in their gold or weapons, but in their direct connection to the energy emanating from the universe. And that's why, when we read about kings who ruled for thousands of years, we're dealing with something deeper than biology. We're dealing with beings who learned to synchronize their existence with the vibration of the cosmos. But as the millennia passed, this knowledge began to disappear. Some say it was stolen, others that it was hidden. The truth is that it was replaced by a simplified version of reality, one that was easier to control. The man stopped looking at the sky and started looking at the ground. He stopped feeling and started just obeying. The divine kings were gone, and in their place emerged mortal rulers who tried to imitate the power of the gods, but without understanding it. The result was chaos, wars, famine, slavery. Humanity had become disconnected from the original vibration, and the more it tried to reproduce it, the further away it became from it. The proof of this disconnect is in the calendar itself. The Sumerians measured time based on celestial movements, especially the cycles of Nibiru, the planet of the gods. This cycle, of approximately 3,600 years, was considered the true divine year. They knew that Earth's time and heaven's time were different, and they believed that the Anunnaki lived under the ruler of cosmic time, where 3,600 years could be just one day to them. When humans lost this sense, they began to age faster, live less, and forget more. It's as if we've been deliberately slowed down, forced to live at a lower frequency. But the most impressive thing is that the texts themselves indicate that this limitation was not natural. It was imposed. The knowledge that made man immortal was sealed. The exact words were, "The gods hid the secret of eternal life and sealed it in the mountains far from the reach of mortals." This phrase appears in different versions, but the message is always the same. Immortality was not lost, it was taken away. And that changes everything, because if it was removed, it means it can be recovered. And if it can be recovered, whoever controls it controls the destiny of humanity. This is the true essence of power, not gold, not military strength, but dominion over time and life. And interestingly, this is exactly what modern elites have been seeking for decades. Extending life, manipulating DNA, creating rejuvenation technologies, exploring cloning. It's the same obsession as the ancient kings, the quest for eternity. The Sumerians described that the oldest kings underwent renewal rituals known as the cycles of light. During these rituals, they were exposed to sounds, vibrations, and intense lights, coming from crystals that armed them. They stored divine energy. These crystals, according to the texts, were fragments of the heart of the stars. They served as energy amplifiers, capable of realigning the body and restoring balance between the physical and spiritual. It was this practice that kept kings young, strong, and conscious for millennia. These rituals were banned after the flood, but did not disappear entirely. Fragments of this wisdom spread throughout the world and became traditions that still exist. The use of bells in religious ceremonies, the power of the pyramids, Tibetan chants, sound healing, temples that vibrate at specific frequencies. All of this is an echo of knowledge that came from the gods and was reinterpreted over time. Modern man calls it spirituality, but the ancients called it sacred science. What if the Sumerian kings still existed in some form? If their lineage continued among us, keeping the memory of this lost connection alive? Many scholars of ancient texts believe that the world's royal families, European dynasties, Eastern emperors, and even some modern political lines bear symbols identical to those used by the kings of Sumer. Is it a coincidence that the staff, the crown, and the eight-pointed star, symbol of Inanna, goddess of the Anunnaki, still appear on coats of arms, flags, and temples of global power? Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe it's continuity. Perhaps the descendants of ancient kings have inherited not just the blood, but the duty to maintain control over what remains of the original knowledge. And if so, we are talking about a cosmic inheritance, a legacy that spanned eras, catastrophes, and entire civilizations, a legacy that determines who rules the world and who remains in the shadows. The Sumerians never spoke of end times, but of renewal of cycles. For them, the world never ends, it just starts again. Each civilization that disappears gives way to another, and lost knowledge always finds a way to return. Perhaps we are living exactly at this moment, the point at which the cycle begins again, and man remembers who he is again. And that is why the theme of the Anunnaki, the origin of humanity and the mystery of 241,000 years, arouses so much interest today, because something inside us recognizes this truth. Awakening is not a theory, it is a memory. And the more you listen, the more you feel the pieces start to fit together. It is as if the echo of the gods is calling, from within the DNA, asking to be heard again. Humanity is about to take the same leap that ancient kings took. Knowledge is returning, fragmented, hidden in symbols, but alive. And when it is complete, perhaps the cycle will return to the starting point, the point where the gods walked among men. Now, I want you to tell me in the comments, do you believe that humanity is about to rediscover the same knowledge that the gods left behind? Leave a like if you feel that this awakening has already begun, and write the phrase, "I feel the cycle starting over," if you also believe that the return of the old gods may not be physical but vibrational, a reconnection between what we were and what we can still be. When we talk about the Sumerian kings and their impossibly long reigns, we're not just exploring a historical curiosity. We're entering territory that touches on the foundations of what we understand by reality. Imagine that these numbers are not exaggerations or translation errors, but codes, clues left for anyone who had the courage to decipher what really happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. Each reign, spanning tens of millennia, could represent not just one ruler's time, but an era of cosmic control, a complete cycle in which one civilization dominated time, biology, and energy. Ancient Sumerian texts state that these kings received power directly from the gods who descended from heaven. This phrase, repeated reverently, was not a metaphor. They described real beings called Anunnaki, who arrived on Earth in shiny vehicles from a distant planet with the purpose of extracting resources and shaping humanity. But there is something deeper to this story. What if resource extraction was not just physical, but also spiritual? What if the gold that the Anunnaki sought so much was just a symbol for something more valuable, man's own vital energy? Think about it. Why is gold the most coveted metal to date? Why does he have such a strong connection to power, eternity, and divinity? The Sumerians said that gold was the blood of the gods, the substance that sustained their immortality, and that they taught humanity how to extract it, refine it, and worship it. Since then, gold has become the center of civilization. Everything revolves around it. But is this a coincidence? Or was the legacy of the gods never forgotten, merely reinterpreted in material form? These kings, upon receiving dominion over earth, were instructed in secrets that went far beyond mining. They learned to use sound, light, and magnetism as tools of creation. The temples and ziggurats of Sumer were not just places of worship, they were energetic laboratories, points of convergence between dimensions. There, rituals were performed to maintain the balance between heaven and earth, between gods and men. And, from time to time, the Anunnaki themselves came down to reset the system, restoring harmony when humans strayed too far from the original path. But something changed. The power that sustained this balance began to be corrupted. The kings, once wise and just, began to compete for the favor of the gods. Ambition, pride, and vanity, profoundly human feelings, began to corrupt the divine blood. And that's when the system started to fail. Time began to shorten. What was once a reign of 36,000 years became 3,600, then from 360. And as the ages passed, the kings completely lost control of time. Immortality was replaced by death and wisdom by ignorance. But records show that some tried to resist. There are mentions of secret rituals performed to reactivate the fire of the gods. They believed that the human soul could be rekindled with original energy through specific vibrations and sounds. Some of these practices have survived as sacred chants, prayers, or mantras, which to this day carry inexplicable power. When chanted at the right frequency, it is said that these sounds can awaken the ancestral memory that sleeps within every human being, the memory that we were once part of the gods. There is also an intriguing mention of ascension houses, hidden places where kings went to renew their life force. They were temples built under the stars, with perfect geometries, designed to amplify cosmic energy. Inside these places, priests and initiates practiced what they called divine breathing, a technique capable of expanding consciousness and reconnecting man to the original vibration of the creators. What they called immortality may have actually been total dominion over body and mind, a spiritual elevation so profound that it made the concept of death unnecessary. Ancient texts also describe a time when the firma shook and the gods returned to heaven. It is the point at which the Anunnaki left Earth, taking with them the secret of eternal life. Humanity was left an orphan. The kings, without the presence of their masters, began to grow old, get sick, and die. The connection was broken and the story collapsed. The world that was once ruled by light has fallen into the shadows of confusion and war. The Sumerian civilization fell, but the myth survived, and that myth spread, shaping all subsequent religions and cultures. The Hebrews called these beings Elohim. The Egyptians worshipped them as Neteru. The Greeks called them the gods of Olympus. Always the same story. Superior beings descend to earth, teach, govern, then leave, promising to return. It's a cycle repeated so many times that it already seems programmed, and maybe it is. Perhaps the return of these beings is linked to the planetary alignment that marks the end of one cosmic cycle and the beginning of another. The same 3,600-year cycle that the Sumerians called the time of the gods. And there's something curious happening now. We are again approaching that point. Coincidence? Or is the global awakening to themes such as the Anunnaki, ancient mysteries and the origin of humanity part of the process? Every day, more people feel that there is something wrong with the official narrative, that the story told in schools is just the tip of an ancient iceberg. It's as if the echo of truth is trying to break the silence, and people are starting to listen. Perhaps the real mystery of 241,000 years of reign is not about kings, but about collective memory. Perhaps what we call lost history is actually humanity's deep trauma, the repressed memory of when we were part of something bigger. And now, That trauma is starting to heal. The vibration of the earth is changing. Consciousness is expanding. What was dormant is awakening. And that's why this topic isn't just archaeology or theory. It's personal. It's about who we are, where we came from, and what we can still become. It's about understanding that humanity is not an accidental creation, but the result of a divine experiment, of a much larger cosmic project, and perhaps the Anunnaki never completely went away. Maybe they've just been shape-shifting, watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal again what they've always known, that within each of us there is the same divine spark that shone in the ancient kings of Sumer. Now tell me in the comments, do you believe that these gods are still among us, guiding humanity in secret? Write, I feel the return of the gods, if you too think we're about to enter a new cycle of revelation. And of course, leave a like if you want to continue exploring with me the secrets that history tried to bury, because what comes next will challenge everything you believe you know about time, life, and humanity itself. The oldest records of Sumer said that the power of the kings came from something called me, a mysterious term that many modern translators associate with divine laws, but which, upon deeper analysis, appears to refer to frequencies, vibrational codes capable of shaping matter and consciousness. The me was the foundation of civilization, the technology of the gods. He was not only on the sacred tablets, but also within the human being. Each person possessed a spark of this power, and the duty of kings was to maintain the balance between divine and human vibrations. But when the gods left, the me was distorted. What was once used to create and heal began to be used to dominate and divide. And it is at this point that humanity began to lose itself. Sumerian priests claimed that me was taught to kings during secret ceremonies. These initiations took place in underground temples, where the walls were covered with luminous inscriptions that pulsed in precise rhythms, emitting sounds almost imperceptible to the human ear. They were resonance chambers, built to amplify spiritual energy. There, initiates learned to manipulate reality through vibration. One word, one tone, one right frequency, and the impossible became possible. This knowledge was what allowed the first kings to reign for millennia, as they literally vibrated in another dimension of time. But when the common man tried to reproduce these rituals without preparation, something went wrong. The vibration became unbalanced and began to fragment the collective mind. The sound that was supposed to heal started to corrupt, and this is how, according to ancient texts, the language of men was confused. The famous Tower of Babel may have been more than a metaphor for pride. It may have been an actual event of vibrational collapse. Humanity, in trying to achieve the power of the gods, broke the original harmony. Communication was lost, memories were scattered, and each civilization began to tell a different version of the same story. The divine kings tried to repair this damage. They created sacred temples called Ekur, which were points of contact with the gods. In them, they tried to restore the old connection. Each Ekur was erected with mathematical precision, aligned with Earth's constellations and magnetic fluxes. They believed that by realigning these centers, they could once again open the channel to the celestial world. Interestingly, these temples were built in places that would later be home to the greatest civilizations in history: Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Mesoamerica. Could it be a coincidence? Or were the builders of the pyramids, ziggurats, and cathedrals, in fact, rebuilding the same energetic map left by the gods? The truth is that the Sumerians never separated religion from science. For them, everything was one thing: the search for reconnection with the divine. And this reconnection came not from blind worship, but from understanding energy. They knew that the universe responded to the frequency of intention, that every sound, every gesture, every thought altered the invisible fabric of reality, and perhaps for this reason the gods chose them as the first guardians of this knowledge. However, from the moment man began to use me selfishly, the Earth's vibration began to fall. The planet, which previously pulsed in harmony with the cosmos, began to oscillate. This oscillation brought physical and spiritual consequences. Seasons changed, kingdoms collapsed, the climate went crazy, and human consciousness slowly densified. Life became shorter, senses more limited, and time began to seem linear. Man had completely disconnected from what the Sumerians called the eternal rhythm. But what if that rhythm could be found again? What if ancient rituals, hidden in the Sumerian tablets and the secret traditions of other cultures, were the way to restore this harmony? Many modern meditation, breathing and sound practices seem to echo fragments of this ancient science. The use of mantras, the power of binaural frequencies, experiences with healing vibrations. It all feels like an unconscious attempt to return to where you started. Maybe that's why so many people, even without fully understanding it, feel something profound when they hear certain ancient music, shamanic beats, or tribal chants. They touch the memory that sleeps in the DNA, the memory of the lost connection with the cosmos. In the Sumerian texts, there is also a prophecy. When man hears the sound of the sky again, the cycle of the gods will be restored. This has always been interpreted symbolically, but perhaps it has a literal meaning. The sound of the sky may be a reference to the cosmic vibration that permeates the universe, the primordial sound that gave rise to creation, the same thing that religions call the Word, the Om, the Word. When humanity hears this sound again, not with its ears but with its consciousness, perhaps it will regain the power it lost. And there is something curious. In recent years, scientists have begun to discover that the universe actually emits sounds. Gravitational waves, pulsars, vibrations that run through the fabric of space-time. Everything vibrates, everything sings. And this confirms what the Sumerians already knew thousands of years ago. Reality is made of sound, and whoever controls sound controls creation. The Sumerian kings knew this, and so their ceremonies involved harps, drums, flutes, and chants that resonated with the very heartbeat of the earth. They created environments where the vibration of the human and the divine merged. This was where magic happened, not magic in the fantasy sense, but an advanced spiritual science based on resonance and balance. Now imagine the impact of regaining this knowledge today. Imagine what would happen if humanity rediscovered how to harmonize its vibrations with the universe. Wars would cease, diseases would disappear, time would no longer be a prison. We would be able to recreate the same state of consciousness that the Sumerian kings experienced, the same that the gods granted them. And perhaps that is exactly what is starting to happen now. The global awakening, the rise in collective frequency, the search for spiritual truth, all of these could be signs that the cycle is starting again. And if so, then the 241,000-year mystery isn't just a story about the past. It's a prophecy about the future. We are about to enter the time of the gods again, and this time power will not be given to kings, but shared among all those who awaken to the original vibration. Now I want to know how you feel about this. Do you believe that the secret of the Sumerians is still dormant within us? Write in the comments, "I want to hear the sound of the sky." If you also feel that the universe is calling us to remember who we really are, leave your like so that this message reaches more people, and subscribe, because in the next part we will explore what the texts hide about the real origin of the Anunnaki and the reason why they may be about to return. If the sounds of heaven are beginning to be heard again, as the ancient Sumerians predicted, it means humanity is on the brink of something gigantic, a shift in consciousness comparable to the moment the gods first descended to earth. The texts say that when the firmament opened, a new race emerged, part divine, part human. This fusion between worlds created the being that we today call man, but perhaps the more correct word would be bridge. Yes, humanity was created to be the bridge between heaven and earth, between the visible and the invisible. And what the Sumerians knew, and we forget, is that this bridge remains active within us, waiting for the right moment to be reactivated. Divine kings dominated this bridge. They understood that the human body was the true temple, that inside each cell there was a particle that vibrated in tune with the cosmos. This particle, called in ancient texts the breath of Anu, was what connected man to the gods. It was the inner flame, the immortal spark, and it is what many today call spiritual DNA, the hidden code that science still cannot completely decipher. Only part of our DNA is active, and the rest, which scientists call junk DNA, may actually be the sleeping record of the gods, the inner book of creation, waiting to be reopened. The Sumerians described that the gods used their own blood to give rise to humanity. This blood, charged with celestial vibration, would have been mixed with Earth's clay, which symbolizes the physical body. The result was a being capable of feeling the material world, but also of hearing the echo of the divine. Over time, this ability was blocked, not only by genetic changes, but by mental conditioning. Man has learned to doubt, to fear, and to forget. And what was forgotten became what we call myth. However, the texts themselves say that oblivion was temporary. When the cycle closes, the tablet stated, the children of earth will once again hear the call of the heavens. This means that humanity has been programmed to awaken, that the memory of the gods was never lost, only silenced. And that is why, in every culture, we see the same pattern repeating itself: the return of the gods, the new dawn, the golden age. Civilizations separated by oceans and millennia tell the same story. It can't be a coincidence. It's with oh, if the entire earth was waiting for the same signal. And this signal seems to be getting stronger and stronger. Today, people feel an uneasiness that they cannot explain. Vivid dreams of lights, of ancient figures, of unknown symbols. A feeling that something big is about to happen. This is not mere imagination. It is the echo of the past reverberating in the present. The vibration of the earth is changing, and along with it, human consciousness. The ancients called this process opening the portals. They said that at certain periods, the earth aligned with the heart of the galaxy, and this connection allowed cosmic energies to penetrate the veil of matter, awakening the dormant seeds of human divinity. During these alignments, the veil between dimensions becomes thin. This is when unexplained phenomena happen most frequently: sightings, lucid dreams, synchronicities, intuitions. It's as if the universe is trying to remind us that we are not alone and never have been. The same energy that moved the Anunnaki thousands of years ago appears to be returning. But the difference is that this time, the return will not come in ships or with grandiose appearances. It will come from within, when man finally remembers what he always was. The kings of Sumer knew that true power came not from without, but from inner alignment. Therefore, before each ceremony, they fasted, purified their body and mind, and prepared to receive the breath of Anu again. This breath, which some interpret as vital energy, was a force so powerful that it could alter the perception of time and even restore the physical body. There are reports of priests who aged in reverse, as if their own bodies obeyed the will of their conscience. Today, we call it a miracle, but maybe it's just science we've forgotten. It's curious to think that everything we seek, healing, balance, wisdom, is already within us. The Sumerians left this message over and over again. Know yourself, and you will know the gods. Udil, this phrase, which would later be repeated by Greek philosophers and spiritual teachers, was born on the banks of the Euphrates. It is the essence of lost knowledge. And the most impressive thing is that, despite millennia of forgetfulness, Human beings still intuitively feel that there is something more. This is why themes like the Anunnaki and the 241,000-year-old kings touch so deeply, because they resonate with a memory that time has not been able to erase. But what if that memory is about to awaken for good? What if modern technology, without realizing it, is recreating the conditions for the same kind of expansion of consciousness that the ancients achieved in energy temples? Think about the advancement of quantum physics, the discovery of electromagnetic fields, the manipulation of DNA. All of this could be an echo, a modern version of what has been done before. The difference is that now humanity walks without masters, trying alone to reopen the portals that the gods once controlled. This is why many feel like something is in the air. It's not superstition, it's harmony. The planetary vibration is rising, and this affects everything, from people's moods to the structure of space-time itself. It is a process that the ancients would call the return of the original light. When this happens, what is hidden comes to light. Secrets are revealed, truths emerge, and no shadow can remain hidden. The same is happening now. Governments releasing documents about UFOs, archaeologists finding artifacts that defy official chronology, ordinary people having intense spiritual experiences. Everything seems to point to the same destiny, the memory that man and the gods have always been one. What if the story of 241,000 years of reign is not just about the kings of Sumer, but about the entire cycle of humanity, a journey of rise, fall, and return to the light? This interpretation changes everything. It means we are living in the final chapter before the next big beginning, that the time of the gods is not in the past, but is about to repeat itself, and the signs are everywhere. You just have to want to see them. Maybe that's why you're watching this video right now. Nothing is by chance. If this story is resonating within you, it is because your soul recognizes something that the mind does not yet understand. The Sumerians would call this star memory, a call that comes from a time before history itself. And that's why I want you to comment below to show that you heard this call. Write, "I feel the memory awaken," if you also believe that the knowledge of the ancients is returning. Leave a like if this video made you think differently, and subscribe now, because in the next episode we'll explore what the return of Nibiru really means and why this name appears in so many different cultures. What is coming could be the most important reunion in human history. When the Sumerians talked about Nibiru, they didn't just describe a planet. They spoke of a cosmic gate, a crossing point between worlds, where time and space intersect differently. They called it the crossroads of the gods. For them, Nibiru was not just a physical celestial body, but also a transitional frequency, the vibrational state in which heaven and earth found themselves. Each time Nibiru approached, great changes occurred. Kingdoms fell, civilizations emerged, and the planet's balance was completely altered. And now, looking at our reality, it is impossible not to notice that something similar is happening again. The 3,600-year cycle, known as the Year of the Gods, marked the return periods of this cosmic energy. It was not a literal visit, like a ship or a planet approaching, but an opening of vibrational portals that allowed human consciousness to expand. It was during these periods that great evolutionary leaps took place, the emergence of civilizations, the birth of new religions, the arrival of new ideas. The Sumerians knew that the universe worked in cycles, and that each cycle brought an opportunity for a new beginning. But they also knew that if humanity was not ready, Nibiru's energy could be devastating. They said that when the gate of the gods opened, it amplified everything that existed, both light and shadow. And this explains why moments of great spiritual advancement have always been followed by periods of chaos. The same power that awakens can also destroy. The secret was to keep the vibration high, because only those who vibrated in tune with the cosmos were able to go through the cycle without getting lost. This is why the divine kings prepared for decades before the arrival of Nibiru, fasting, purifying the body, practicing silence, communing with the energy temples. They knew that when the vibration of the universe increased, only the pure of heart could withstand the intensity. And perhaps that is exactly what this moment in history represents. Nibiru's return may not be physical but spiritual. We are living at a vibrational transition point where everything accelerates: emotions, thoughts, time. Every choice, every intention, every gesture generates almost immediate consequences. The line between the visible and the invisible is becoming thinner. People feel omens, notice inexplicable coincidences, dream of lights or ancient cities. It is as if the veil is being lifted, the same veil that the Sumerians called the cloak of oblivion. Ancient texts said that when Nibiru approached, the gods returned to their homes, and man was tested. This test was neither a war nor a disaster, but a test of conscience. Those who had forgotten who they were lost in fear, while those who remembered their divine origin were able to cross the transition and awaken to a new level of understanding. That is why knowledge was kept under lock and key, passed only to the initiated, because Nibiru's power was real and it could liberate as well as consume. What if what we are experiencing now is that test? Think about it. Wars, climate change, political collapses, a global sense of disorder. All of this may just be a reflection of a larger transformation happening behind the veil. The vibration of the planet is increasing, and what was previously hidden is now coming to the surface. Corruptions revealed, secrets exposed, truths that would once have been ridiculed are now being discussed openly. It is the same purification cycle that the ancients described. Before the light returns, the shadow must be seen, and it's no coincidence that interest in ancient topics like the Anunnaki and 241,000-year-old kings is exploding right now. It is as if an invisible force is guiding humanity back to its origins. Modern man feels, even without understanding, that there is something wrong with the official narrative. He searches for answers, but what he finds are fragments of a past that has been erased, and each fragment is a memory. Each Sumerian tablet, each repeated myth is a key that unlocks a piece of what we were, and what we can still be. The ancient priests said that when the sound of the sky fused again with the sound of the earth, the portals of Nibiru would open, and the sons of light would once again walk among us. This moment would be marked by a great collective awakening, not only spiritual but also physical. The human body, upon resonating with the new frequency of the planet, would begin to change. Science would call this evolution. The ancients would call it ascension. What was previously seen as a miracle would become natural. Diseases would disappear, aging would decrease, and the perception of reality would expand beyond the common senses. The Sumerians believed that the human body was a replica of the earth, and that, like the planet Aneta, he was going through eras of renewal. When the cosmic cycle arrived, the body reacted, because it was made of the same vibrational matter as the cosmos. The blood, the DNA, the magnetic field of the heart, everything was beginning to align again with the vibration of the galactic center. This was the secret of the rebirth of the gods. They did not die, they just changed their state. Now imagine the impact of all this happening globally. Imagine billions of people awakening at the same time to the awareness that life is much more than work, routine, and survival. Imagine the system collapsing because people start to remember that they don't need permission to live free. This is what the ancients called the final liberation. The return of Nibiru's energy would not be an invasion, but a return of divine consciousness to Earth. The signs are already here. You can feel them. Every time you feel an unexplained shiver, Every time you have a strong feeling, every time you look up at the sky and feel that something is different, that is the vibrational field of the planet changing. And those who can realize this are being called to reconnect, to remember, to awaken. The 241,000-year-old history of kings is not just a record of the past. It is a reminder that there was a time when man and the divine were one. A time when we knew who we were and lived in harmony with the universe. Now that time is returning, but to cross the gate, you have to vibrate in truth. You need to let go of fear, doubt, and ego, because the return of the gods will not be announced with trumpets. It will be felt within the human heart. Do you feel this too? That feeling that something bigger is about to happen? If so, then you are already part of this awakening. Leave a like right now if you feel this energy coming, and comment on the phrase, "I'm ready for the return," if you believe that Nibiru is more than a planet. It's the final call to remember who we really are. Sign up to continue with me on this journey, because the next step will reveal something that the Sumerians feared to write on tablets: the true destiny of humanity when the cycle of the gods is completed. The ancient Sumerians believed that when the Nibiru cycle was complete, the world would enter a new state of consciousness. They called this the return of the original light, a phase in which the boundaries between gods and men would dissolve, and forbidden knowledge would become accessible again. This transition would not only be physical, but also spiritual, a profound transformation capable of altering the structure of reality. It was the end point and the beginning of everything. For them, time was like a snake that bites its own tail. The end and the beginning always meet. And now, looking around, we realize that perhaps we are exactly at that point of reunion. The ancient tablets described that when the last cycle began, signs would be visible not only in the sky, but also within humanity itself. Man would feel an inexplicable impulse to seek his origins, to question what he was taught. Religions would begin to fragment, institutions would lose control, and hidden truths would be exposed. The power of empires would fall not through wars, but through collective awakening. People would stop blindly believing and start feeling for themselves. This was, according to the Sumerians, the true revolution, the return of consciousness. They claimed that the human body would be the first to react to the new vibration. Sudden changes in energy, tiredness, feelings of déjà vu, intense dreams, even heart palpitations, all of this would be the body trying to align itself with the planet's new vibrational field. The heart, which has always been represented as the throne of the soul, would be the main antenna connecting with the sound of the gods. This is why so many ancient texts talk about opening your heart, not in the emotional sense, but in the energetic sense. The heart is the point where linear time breaks down and consciousness enters a state of eternity. It is the same portal that the Sumerian kings accessed in their rituals and which is now being reopened within each of us. And there is another detail that few people realize. The Sumerian symbol of Nibiru was a double-cross star with lines that intertwine in the center, representing the intersection between heaven and earth, spirit and matter. Interestingly, this same symbol appears in diverse cultures, from Babylonian temples to Egyptian seals and medieval cathedrals. Always the same design, the same code. This indicates that the knowledge was not lost, just disguised. Those who knew the true meaning hid it in symbols, in works of art, in architectural structures. They left messages for the future, for us. Many ancient scholars said that the Anunnaki promised to return when humanity was ready to understand what really happened. Something happened, but perhaps the return of the gods is not literal. Maybe they never left. Perhaps they are within the very vibration that we are now rediscovering. Each time someone awakens to this truth, a part of their energy manifests again on Earth. It is as if we are rebuilding the body of the gods, not physical but energetic, made up of millions of awakened minds. This would be the new golden age that the Sumerians mentioned so much, the rebirth of universal consciousness. The kings who ruled for 241,000 years were not just rulers, they were guardians of this bridge between worlds. They knew that longevity came from balance between body, mind, and spirit. When humanity's vibration fell, the connection was severed and mortality emerged. But according to the texts, this balance could be restored. They described the process in 3 stages: awakening, purification, and ascension. Awakening begins with remembering. When you feel something inside, you recognize an ancient truth. Purification comes next, when old beliefs and fears begin to dissolve. And ascension is the moment when you completely reconnect to the original vibration, becoming, as they said, one with the sound of heaven. Today, science is beginning to touch on these same concepts without even realizing it. Research into vibration, electromagnetic fields, and quantum consciousness reveals that reality is shaped by frequency. What the Sumerians called divine sound, we call energy. It's the same principle, just with a different language. And perhaps the reason the Sumerian kings lived so long was exactly that. They knew how to keep their vibrational field in perfect harmony with the universe. They did not age because their bodies responded to the vibration of eternity. Imagine the impact of this knowledge in our time. Imagine if we rediscovered how to control our own vibration. The world would change completely. Diseases would disappear, the borders between countries and religions would lose meaning, and humanity would understand that it is part of something infinitely larger. This is what the texts call the unification of the heavens and the earth, a state of consciousness in which man does not seek the gods outside, but finds them within himself. And it's curious how, in the midst of modern confusion, more and more people are turning inward, seeking to meditate, connect, silence the noise of the world. This is no coincidence. It is the very vibration of the cosmic cycle calling each soul back into balance. The same sound that the Sumerian priests heard in the temples is echoing again, but now within the minds and hearts of billions of people. The Nibiru portal is not just a gateway in the sky, it is a state of collective consciousness that is being reactivated. The Sumerian kings left a warning. When man completely forgets what he is, the cycle will close. But when he remembers, the cycle will begin again. That's the key to everything. What we are seeing now, the revelations, the global awakening, the collapse of ancient systems, is the beginning of that new beginning. It is the same moment described on the tablets as the return of brilliance. It's not the end of the world, it's the end of the illusion. And if you're listening to this now, maybe you didn't get here by chance. Perhaps this message found you because your vibrational field is already ready to understand what the kings knew. Awakening does not happen all at once. It begins with a question, with a feeling, with a memory. Something inside you recognizes the truth even when the whole world tries to deny it. And this recognition is the first step to crossing the portal. Now I want to invite you to reflect. If everything the Sumerians wrote was symbolic, why did so many different civilizations tell the same story? Why do the same gods, the same signs, the same events repeat themselves from culture to culture? Maybe because they were all talking about the same thing, the same cycle, the same return. Perhaps the real secret of 241,000 years is that the time of the gods never ended. It just hides until we are ready to remember it. If this idea makes you think, if in some way you feel that there is something true in these words, leave a like right now and comment below, "I remember the sound of the gods." This simple phrase helps spread the vibration of this message, makes more people find it and wake up too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because in the next video, we'll dive into the most mysterious point of all. What really happened when the gods decided to leave, and what ancient texts reveal about the day they promised to return. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Few actually stick around to the end of a journey like this. This shows that you are not just watching, you are awakening. And that's why I want to make you a special invitation. Subscribe to the channel now, because the next video that is already appearing on your screen is the direct continuation of this story. And in it, we go even deeper into the mystery that the Sumerians left hidden. Leave a like if this content made you see the world with different eyes. It is the fuel that keeps this work alive and helps this message reach more people who, like you, are in search of the truth. And I want you to comment below on the phrase, "I heard the call of the ancients." This is the password for the community that is forming here. People who feel that there is something much bigger happening and want to understand what is really behind the history of humanity. So before leaving, do this. Leave a like, comment on the sentence, and now watch the next video that appears on the screen. What you discover there could completely change everything you thought about the gods, time, and who we really are.